All right, so let's get to our first speaker of this conference. I have to say this person, I guess, universal alignment, God, or power of be, you name it, but made it that by, I guess not by mistake, but made me and John met a few years ago, and we started a beautiful alliance. This next speaker is actually a person that is, in my book, is one of those people that I would call a unicorn, because he's not only passionate in what he does, but every time I speak with him, it's like he gives the 110% on what he does. Mr. Payne is the owner and chairman and CEO of Purelife Health Science Group, and he has a team of scientists that he works with across the globe to keep him updated on all the latest scientific research and all the latest trends and solutions on holistic matter. And the work that John does is actually is incredible, because he's going to tell you more about it. But he has touched many people, millions of people, I would say, because also work with also some powerful people. It's funny, sometimes I spoke with John. I said, "Hey, John, so how's it going?" "Oh, yeah, last week I went and have a meeting with the Minister of Health of blah place, and I spoke with so-and-so." It's like, what? Like, kind of unbelievable. Anyway, so John's work is specializing in the prevention and long-term reversal of critical health conditions caused by metabolic disorders in the body. And being this conference around metabolic disorder, he was one of the first people that I call him and say, "John, you need to come and speak at the conference." So please, let's give a round of applause to Mr. John Payne.
My superpower is having the privilege to work with people at UNS. I want to talk today about some of the new information that's come out regarding a health issue that I've made it a commitment for myself and my organization to focus on, and that's autism, and how your metabolic health how somebody's metabolic health directly affects autism. Autism is an etiologic heterogeneous entity caused by many different disorders occurring in the central nervous system at an early stage in life. While the etiopathogens of ASD are unknown, clinical manifestations are diverse, and many possible factors such as genetic and environmental have been implicated. As such, it has been a great challenge to identify key neurobiological mechanisms and to develop effective treatments. Now, I'd like to expand upon that a little bit. We now know, nobody knows exactly what causes autism, including me, but we do know certain things. And those are, you have a much higher percentage of having an autistic child if you're a mother who has a child late in life, really in your 40s. Secondly, if the mother has a deficiency in iron during pregnancy and during nursing, you have a much greater chance of having an autistic child. Thirdly, if the mother does not have a natural birth, instead has a C-section, which means the child does not acquire the bacteria that it needs for its immune system that is typical during a natural childbirth. And then also if the mother doesn't nurse. Typically, a child needs to have the nutrients, the specific type of nutrients that exist in a new mother's nursing milk. If the mother doesn't nurse the child, for at least a year. And quite frankly, from a scientific standpoint, I believe that the mother should nurse for approximately 2 years. Almost impossible to get anybody to do that anymore. But the child doesn't acquire the immune properties that it really needs to successfully have an early development stage. There's one other thing that has come out. We always blame, let me change that wording. It's generally considered many health issues, and especially metabolic, as being inherited from the mother only. But we now know that there's one specific gene which can be tested for that the father only carries, that if the father has this specific gene, the chances of having an autistic child goes up significantly, like 37%. So those things we know can contribute to an increased risk of having an autistic child. Now, autism has traditionally been viewed as a neurological disorder. However, no single area of brain development has been identified typically, and no consistent neuropathology has ever been defined. However, several metabolic defects have been associated with autistic symptoms with a rate higher than that found in the general population. Inborn errors of metabolism can probably account for less than 5% of individuals. Early diagnosis of the metabolic disorders and proper therapeutic interventions significantly improve the long-term cognitive and behavioral outcomes. I'm going to speak a little bit about one situation that we've encountered that this particular family, God help them, has 5 autistic children. And they came to us. They're based in the United Arab Emirates. They came to us and asked if there's any. They wanted to have more children because they were desperate to have a child they could go out to dinner with, go to the beach with, carry on a conversation with, etc. And they asked for my help if I could give them any guidance in what to do or not to do. Of course, the mother was 43. So I gave them the information I just gave you, and they asked me if I would develop a nutritional profile that would help alleviate as much as possible the potential of them having an autistic child, which I did. And I do want to say, I don't know if it was my intervention or something else they did or just the luck of the draw, but they do have a beautiful 2.5-year-old son now that is neuronormal. But one of the things that is very important, and this is where I really like what UNS does, the nutritional profile of a mother needs, if she's going to have children, needs to be something more than the Western diet. And what UNS does, if mothers prior to getting pregnant would go through the nutrition response testing program, we should spread Dr. Bread's phone number and profile across the world, because it can do more good than anything they can do. We also found they did one other thing that was, I consider, highly intelligent. We all know that early intervention makes a big difference in what the outcomes are going to be on an autistic child. The sooner you can get them into some type of treatment, the better the long-term outcome is. With this particular child, they asked me not only to put the mother on a specific type of program, but they had the mother take Technon during nursing, and they put the child on it as soon as it could drink naturally. They also put the child on it. Now, whether that is what made the difference, I don't know. But we have 2 thrilled parents that is part of our background now. There are 3 metabolic impairments associated with ASD methylation, with ASD. That's methylation, transsulfuration, and mitochondrial function. Every single autistic child that we've been able to do an analysis of has mitochondrial dysfunction. And one of the things that has to be done is you have to you have to regenerate the mitochondria as best as possible. And one of the things that we did put in Technon is the only plant that I know of that has been clinically proven to regenerate the mitochondria. Our goal is to have people gain a greater awareness of and a deeper understanding of the need to navigate these complex metabolic pathways in people with ASD. Because mitochondria are concentrated in neurosynapses, mitochondrial dysfunction can directly affect neurological functions. The treatment of metabolic impairments are typically diet and lifestyle. The foundation of treatment for metabolic dysfunction should begin with nutrition through natural plant-based whole foods and foods that contain natural bacterial supplementation, are anti-inflammatory, and contribute to a healthy gut flora. An important lifestyle pattern that needs to be positively impacted that we often ignore is sleep. Sleep is commonly disrupted in people with ASD. A person with autism typically doesn't sleep until 2 to 4 a.m. in the morning. Yet it is a time when the body performs critical detoxification and metabolic processes, and it repairs itself. Also, stress must be addressed. Stress is catabolic and depletes nutrients that are needed for proper methylation, transsulfuration, and mitochondrial function to maintain metabolic health. In addition to metabolic issues, the microbiome must be addressed to effectively treat ASD. As we all know, our gut flora has a massive impact on our overall health. Scientists are only just now discovering the enormous impact of our gut health. The gut microbiome is the most important scientific discovery for human healthcare in recent decades. That's according to James Kinross, a microbiome scientist and surgeon at Imperial College in London. We discovered it, or rediscovered it, at the age of genetic sequencing less than 15 years ago. Your gut microbiome weighs about 2 kilograms and is bigger than the average human brain. It is an active community of trillions of bacteria and microbes. It contains at least 150 times more genes than the human genome. And the gut's microbiome is critical for our short-term and our long-term health. Health issues such as depression and anxiety are clearly modified by our gut microbiome. Scientists are now saying that you can treat schizophrenia and depression by treating your gut, not with chemicals and drugs. Studies suggest that having a diverse population of gut microbiomes is directly associated with better health. Professor Jack Gilbert, an award-winning microbiome scientist and author at the University of California, San Diego, has stated, over the last 80 years and since the dawn of antibiotics, there has been a multi-generational loss of microbes that appear to be important for human health. They are passed from mother to child during birth via breast milk and the birth canal and skin contact throughout the generations. But at some point in the last 3 or 4 generations, we have lost some. We're not entirely sure if the cause was our lifestyle, our diet, or cleanliness in our homes, or the use of antibiotics. And I believe it's a combination of all 3. I mean, how many times, as children, I'm old, okay? So I admit I played in the dirt and did all the things that children did back in those days. My daughter has 3 children. For the first 5 years of their life, they took a bath in hand sanitizer, not in the shower. And we've been able to correct most of, but they were allergic to almost everything they come in contact, whether it was food or anything else. Now, we've been able to, once I realized what was happening and could convince, look, The meanest animal on earth is a new mother, okay? And that includes my daughter. So after extensive negotiations, okay, I was able to get her to come to the realization that if we treated their gut and their metabolic systems, then we were going to be able to provide her children a better long-term life. Her children essentially function normally. I mean, one of her middle son was allergic to everything. I mean, she had taken him, put him through the Mayo Clinic, everything you could imagine. They couldn't help him. But by changing what he ate, what nutrition he took, and when he took this nutrition, because, you know, the human body uses or evacuates most of the nutrients that we take in every 12 to 16 hours. So you got to keep it up to speed on a 24-hour cycle. Anyway, this is a essentially normal functioning human being now that at 17 years of age can go out and play football and get in the dirt and whatever without breaking out with every rash known to man. It's important for me to communicate effectively to everybody in this room, which most of you probably already know this. But if we treat our gut or our microbiome properly, we end up with really good results. Scientific reviews have shown that the association between ASD and gut microbiome composition in individuals with ASD had a lower abundance of specific beneficial bacteria and a higher abundance of less beneficial bacteria. There were important differences between the microbiota of children with ASD and typically neural-normal developing children. A 2021 study has demonstrated that autism spectrum disorder is related to changes in the gut microbiome. The findings are published in M Systems, an open access journal of the American Society for Microbiology. And they state, longitudinally, we were able to see that within an individual, changes in the microbiome were associated with changes in behavior. This was stated by the principal study investigator, Catherine Luzapone, PhD, a microbiologist at the University of Colorado. You know, and this goes back to the old saying that if it looks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Or sorry, I think it's if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. We know enough. Scientists know enough. Big Pharma has spent billions of dollars and 30 years trying to develop a single new treatment for autism. Not one has been developed and brought to market. Not one. And the reason is they focus strictly on neurological function. They don't focus on our metabolic health and on our microbiome. But that's the source. No matter what causes it, which we don't completely know yet, but we know how we can impact it in a positive way and what impacts it on another way. You can't go to Subway and expect to be healthy. I mean, to tell a funny story, I used to, because I traveled a great deal, I used to think, I could just go to Subway, have something simple, and go to bed and get some sleep. And I was in London, and I was about to speak at a medical conference, and I saw an article in the newspaper, and it says that Subway is no longer allowed in the UK to call their bread bread because it has too much sugar in it. Now, this was traumatic for me. I had to give up Subway for the rest of my life. A major frontier for gut microbiome exploration is its relationship with our brain, something the new fields of nutritional psychiatry and psychobiotics are researching currently now. We already know that the gut has its own nervous system, the enteric nervous system, and it contains 100 million neurons. We also know that the short-chain fatty acids introduced from microbiome fermentation in the gut are quite similar to some mood-stabilizing prescription drugs without the addiction factor that falls in with most of these drugs that are specific for schizophrenia and depression. And everybody in this room knows that the number of children, especially teenagers, that have depression now has gone up dramatically. Now, to me, and forgive me again, I'm old, to me, that's an indictment of us as parents, because we've let our children, we've fed them, we've let them eat what they eat. And forgive me for this, I know this is anti-everything in culture today. We put them in front of a video screen or an iPad or a cell phone, and we use that to raise them. And we wonder why they have so many mental health issues. I just came back from the UAE, in Dubai, a few days ago. And they were talking, before I left, had a meeting at the Ministry of Health, and the major topic of conversation that they were talking about is the number of teenage suicides they were having. Now, I'm a parent and a grandparent, which I'm sure most people in here are. I can't imagine having to deal with my 13-year-old child or my grandchild committing suicide. I can't imagine having to deal with that. And yet it's increasing every year. And my opinion, I believe we can trace it back to those two things. Our diets, which affect our microbiome, and the cultural issues of TikTok and YouTube and all the other social media platforms, which I don't have, so I don't know much about them, other than the harm that I know that they do. Again, what I was saying about the short-chain fatty acids produced from microbial fermentation in the gut are quite similar to some mood-stabilizing prescription drugs. I think it's very important that we keep that in mind. Some of the association that we see between healthier diets and better brain health could be because your microbes are producing psychoactive substances from your diet to help stabilize your moods. And quite frankly, this is according to Kimberly Wilson, who's a chartered psychologist and noted author. Two recent studies, which I'm going to quote that just came out, one in July and one in October of this year, follow along what I'm saying. A study published on July 12, 2024 in the National Institute of Mental Health has specifically identified associations between the gut microbiome and autism spectrum disorder. Their findings indicate that there is a reduced microbial diversity in people with autism. Gastrointestinal issues are common in individuals with autism, potentially due to the strong associations between gut issues and seizures, sleep disorders, and psychiatric problems. Prior studies investigating the link between the gut microbiome and autism have focused on the bacterial content of the gut microbiome. However, the investigators expanded their assessment to include archaea, which is the ancient microorganisms that we have in our gut, or they used to call it microbacteria or archaea bacteria, but now they just call it archaea, fungi, viruses, microbial genes, and metabolic pathways to better understand the complex association between gut health and autism. In the study, the investigators performed metagenomic sequencing on fecal samples from 1,627 children aged 1 to 13 years with or without autism. Of the participants, 24.4% were female. Their findings revealed 14 archaea, 51 bacteria, 7 fungi, 18 virus, 27 microbial genes, and 12 metabolic pathways that were altered in children with autism. Also, a study that was published on October 16, 2024, by King Saud University looked at the complex interplay between autism and gut microbiota in children. This study focused on the changes in composition of the gut bacteria in children with autism, exploration of possible mechanisms via the gut microbiome that might influence the brain and thus lead to autism symptoms, as well as potential treatments that involve modulation of gut flora to improve the symptoms of autism in children, i.e. probiotics, postbiotics, and changes in diet. Children with autism are more likely to suffer from gastrointestinal problems. In my experience treating thousands of autistic children, almost all of them had some form of gut disruption, whether it was their ability to digest food, constipation, or diarrhea. And so the role of the gut flora or the microbiome in autism has been investigated, showing that there are differences in gut bacteria, compositions between those with neurotypical versus autistic traits. This supports the notion that the gut microbiome directly contributes to autism development. There has been improvement in clinical outcomes by specifically targeting the gut flora. The likely cause of this reversal in autistic symptoms was attributed to a shift in gut microbiota, a change to the suite of microorganisms resident in the gut tract. This showed change in composition in autistic children, notably in terms of the bacteria in their metabolomic production. Importantly, the gut microbiome communicates with the brain via a well-integrated network of ergonomic communication pathways known as the gut-brain axis. Improvements in the gut microbiome results in improvements in the communication pathways through and of the gut-brain axis. Almost all our genes are influenced by the food that we eat. According to new research published in the journal Nature Microbiology, this study shows that while the activity of our genes influences our metabolism, the opposite is also true, and the nutrients available to cells influence our genes. In many cases, the effects were so strong that changing a cell's metabolic profile could make some of the genes behave in a completely different manner. Previous studies have suggested that another player in gene regulation may exist, and that's the metabolic network. The biochemical reactions that occur within an organism, these reactions mainly depend on the nutrients a cell has available to it. The sugars, amino acids, fatty acids, and vitamins that are derived from the food we eat. I'm going to give people a perfect example of what I mean by this. Everybody in this room knows somebody who can eat any amount of food they want, whenever they want it, and they don't gain a pound. If I think about the dessert tray, I gain 5 pounds. If I actually walk by it, I gain 11 pounds. Okay? The reason for that is 2 specific populations of bacteria that naturally exist in our guts. And the population, that's bacteroidetes and firmicutes. Now, the ratio in our microbiome of those 2 bacteria is meant to be 1-to-1. The average human in the world right now, those ratios are between 1-in-20 and 1-in-80. And if those ratios of those 2, just those 2, and we have trillions in our gut, but if the ratios of those 2 bacteria are out of the proper ratio, Daniele and I can sit down at a table, eat exactly the same food at exactly the same time in exactly the same quantity, and if my ratios are out of balance and his are in balance, I'll extract 40% more calories from that food than he did. Now think about what that adds up in terms of pounds over a year. A lot. And it all goes back to our diet and whether we have a healthy microbiome or an unhealthy microbiome. Cellular metabolism plays a more dynamic role in the cells than previously thought. I've been speaking about this since 2001. And I have to be honest to everybody in this room. The very first time I presented it at a medical convention of MDs in Dallas, Texas, Halfway through my presentation, one of the doctors stood up and yelled at the top of his lungs, "You are a quack." 2 years later, I spoke at the same convention, and this same gentleman, to his credit, stood up in the middle of the meeting and said, "I was wrong and you were right." Forgive me for this too. This is strictly my opinion, but I've always in my mind always thought, and I'm talking about MDs specifically, that these are the dumbest smart people on earth. They know nothing about nutrition. They don't credit nutrition with anything. I come out with a formula that specifically helps in a nutritional formula that specifically helps in an area of need. And the first thing that an MD will tell me is, where are the clinical studies? So I'll go off and spend $4 million in 2 years of my life, do 2 clinical studies because they require 2, come back to them, present them the clinical studies, and they'll tell me, "Oh, I need to prove that to myself." Okay? And they'll never get around to doing it. Because if it's nutrition-based, it can't work. Now, if I come up with a chemical or a drug, they'll embrace it. Cellular metabolism plays a more dynamic role in the cells than previously thought, as I said. In light of limited success of a purely neurological approach to treating autism spectrum disorder, which means zero, none, a new paradigm is emerging. What was once viewed as a brain disorder is now viewed as a multi-system disorder, not a neurological disease, associated with predictable patterns of physiological and biochemical dysfunction. Recent research shows that the gut and the brain are connected through the central nervous system, and it establishes how they can communicate from the bacteria and enzymes in the gut through the vagus nerve to the neurons in the brain. Experts now say improving the gut-brain relationship could help improve neural health. Key word, they say could. Recent neuroscience studies have found that the biological makeup of the gut flora contribute to most of the characteristic symptoms of autism. Characteristic symptoms of autism. Specifically, they suggest that the pathway between the gut bacteria and the central nervous system can affect social behaviors. Effective and successful treatment will require a multi-system approach and addressing the genetic aspect, metabolic functions, and especially the mitochondrial dysfunction and degradation, and the direct impact of our gut microbiome on both physical and neurological health. New research validates autism linked to the gut. Researchers have identified a microbial signature for autism spectrum disorder, a critical finding that offers clarity about how the gut microbiome actually influences autism. Accumulated evidence that has revealed that gut microbiota regulates autism for behaviors through several mechanisms, upregulating the Y-ambutyric acid receptor gene expression in the brain, restoring the excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitter balance, and increasing oxytocin synthesis in the hypothalamus. The linkage between gut microbiomes and brain health is the key to helping us understand and treat ASD. Many studies have highlighted a two-way connection between the gut and the brain, popularly known as the gut-brain axis. With progressing technology, we realize that the gut has a complex nervous system which interferes directly with the brain and allows bidirectional flow of information. This interaction gives us the idea that function, mood, and cognition may be influenced by our gastrointestinal contents. A new player has emerged as a key regulator of the gut-brain axis, and that's the trillions of microbes within the gut or the microbiome. A big reassessment study from late 2023, scientists have found a definitive association between gut bacteria and autism spectrum disorder. The gut-brain axis elucidates the bidirectional communication between gut microbiota and the brain, which affects a host of behaviors. This interaction acts through neuronal and chemical signaling pathways, including the vagus nerve, that transmits sensory information from gut to brain versus neural afferent connections. Microbial-derived endocrine and metabolic signals directly affecting brain functions, and microbiota-induced neuroimmune responses in the central nervous system. Many studies have identified the two-way connection between the gut and the brain, popularly known as the gut-brain axis. The nexus between gut microbiota and autism is the most fascinating area of microbiome research. With the progressing technology, finally a new player has emerged, but the trillions of the microbes with the gut and the microbiota has shown to directly affect autism. And we've shown outside of any type of treatment in multiple studies that if they treat specific children diagnosed with autism with specific probiotics, prebiotics, etc., that they can have positive improvements in symptoms. In short, if you fix the gut, you tend to fix the brain. Now, the newly identified solution to dysbiosis in the gut and creating host microbiota homeostasis, clearing the metabolic pathways, toning the vagus nerve, and calming the inflammatory cytokines and increasing the activity of areas like amygdala and can control emotions and behavior, and that's called Technon. Now, Technon is a plant-based natural formula that has, in addition to it, we have a specific extract of a specific type of camel, and this extract is from the colostrum of this particular type of camel, from the colostrum in camel milk. Okay, it's not camel milk in general. You can't go get camel milk and expect to get the same results, because that's been tried in many clinical studies around the world. You get a small percentage of children or people that are helped or proven in a benefit. It's less than 17%. But these specific, this extract we were able to identify and take from the colostrum of this particular camel is virtually bioidentical to the colostrum that's in a new mother's nursing milk. And look, a mother's nursing milk is the greatest nutrition ever created. Everybody in the world, including me, has tried to duplicate it. None of us have been able to do it. But I've been able to find this particular ingredient that we're able to extract that creates the same type of healthy bacterial environment that a child needs in its developmental stages.